Welcome to the She Hit Refresh podcast, a podcast for women age 30 and up who want to figure out and fast track their move abroad. I'm your host, Seppi, rhymes with Peppy. And if you're new here and feel like life is passing you by and that dream to move abroad is just that, still a dream, this podcast is for you. Because guess what? I'm here to tell you it's not too late, and yes, you can make it happen. So in each episode, I bring you real stories from women just like you who've made the leap and are thriving abroad. And as always, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor this season, International Living, for making this episode possible. So let's dive into today's episode. Today, I'm so excited to welcome someone who's already inspired so many women in our community, and that is Patricia Brooks. Patricia is 58 years young and the founder of the Courage Catalyst, and she helps single women go from feeling stuck to thriving abroad. She was actually a special guest inside of our Refreshers Lounge, which is my membership community for women who want ongoing support as they're working towards their move abroad. And in the lounge, she shared her story of moving to France in her 50s, and today she's here in the podcast to share her story with you. So after leaving her corporate job at 51, Patricia followed her heart to the south of France, where she built a completely new life on her own terms. And this episode, we're going to talk about how she made that leap, what visa she took, what visa she's on now, what it's been like building a business abroad, learning the language, and so much more. Patricia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Seppi, for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on. I love your story. I've been following you for a long time. You're a member of the She Refresh community and our Facebook group. And every time you post something, people just light up and really connect with your story. So as I mentioned, you're in France now. We will get into your life in France. But can you tell us a bit about your life before you made that decision to move abroad?
Yeah, so before I decided to move abroad, I was in a rut. I was going into a job that I really didn't like, and I was feeling like there's got to be more to life. I was a project manager, and life was good, right? I was quote unquote successful, but I felt like there was something more. And in 2015, 2016, I had this desire to learn the French language and live in a French-speaking country. It was really a hit of intuition that just kind of pushed me, do this thing, do this thing. At first, the idea was Canada, but then I thought about the winters. And I thought, no, I can't do that. So in 2015 was when I came to France for the first time. And that was when I thought, yeah, I could see myself living here.
So that time you went in 2015, was that sort of a scouting trip? I mean, was that your first time in France, feeling it out?
First time in August of 2015. And I went with a friend who is probably no longer a friend after that trip because traveling with people can be challenging. But it was really to kind of see if France would suit me. It really wasn't a scouting trip. I went to Paris and Aix-en-Provence. And those two cities were nice, but they weren't my cities. But it was really kind of to test the waters.
Definitely, yeah, to get that vibe check to see, is this meeting the expectation or exceeding the expectation I have in my mind? How long were you there for on that trip?
It was 7, 8 days, not long at all.
Then did you leave that trip thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to try to make my move here?
Yes. So after that trip, I was like, I can see myself living in France. Not Paris, not Aix, not sure where. And I wanted to experience France in a way on my own, right? I was afraid to solo travel, which is why I went with this friend who said, oh, if you ever want to go to France, let me know. And I was like, oh yeah, this will be easier. But it was actually harder because I would go into the stores and want to speak French, want to practice my French. And my friend would go in front of me and say, do you speak English? And it just kind of ruined the whole thing for me. So about 9 months later, I came back to France to have that experience, the experience that I really wanted to have. And that was a scouting trip. I started in Toulouse, my city, not my city, but while I was in Toulouse, I took a day trip to Perpignan. And I fell in love. I fell in love with this place. It just felt right to me.
Yeah. And that's where you live now. You live in Perpignan.
Live outside of Perpignan. My first year I spent in Perpignan, and it was great because I didn't need a car. The train station was a 5-minute walk from my house, so I could travel. But as I explored Perpignan, I couldn't find the neighborhood that felt like the neighborhood that was my neighborhood. And so I found a town called Serres, which is about 40 minutes outside of Perpignan. It's 10 minutes from the Spanish border. I didn't have that same feeling that I had when I first found Perpignan. But I thought, well, maybe this is my place, maybe it's not, but I can give it a year to find out. And now, 6 years after that, I am still here, and this is home.
I think a lot of people know where Barcelona is. If you're in Barcelona and you take the train or drive up, you just cross the border into France, and not too far away is Perpignan, which is kind of a coastal town.
Yes, it's not far from the Mediterranean. It's probably about 25-minute drive to the sea. And it's, I guess, probably about a 2-hour train ride to Barcelona.
Got it. And then you are in a smaller village outside of that. So you're living a village life, which I love. A lot of people are attracted to go to a big city, but I know some people also want to just slow their lives down and move somewhere where they get that really local experience.
I had a choice when I was living in Perpignan and decided that that was not where I was going to stay long term. I had a choice to go closer to the sea or closer to the Pyrenees Mountains. And for me, I love the sea. It's beautiful. But my sign is Capricorn, which is the goat, right? It's an earth sign. And so the mountains felt or feel more grounding to me. And so I chose closer to the mountains. And I'd come to Serres one Saturday morning. They have a wonderful Saturday market here. And it was delightful. So I thought, why not try Serres? Yeah.
And you've been there ever since. So going back, because I have so many questions about your pre-move, you had done the trip to France with your friend, you did a scouting trip, but had you known anyone who had moved to France or moved abroad that was in your circle or community?
No, absolutely not. For me, this was really a wild hair of an idea. But before 2015, living abroad hadn't crossed my mind. So I didn't know anybody in my circle who had made a move abroad. In 2017, I hired a coach, and she had coached somebody who moved to Italy for a couple of years. And I reached out to her to kind of get some information, but I didn't know her personally. So I was the first.
Okay. And so let's talk about that. I mean, you got the idea to move. And what exactly sparked that? Because you mentioned you were learning French and you weren't happy with your work life, but what exactly was the click to I'm going to move to a foreign country instead of maybe finding another place in the US that maybe was a better fit?
Well, see, that was a part of it. I did think, well, if I were to move in the United States, where would I go? There was not a state that I thought would scratch this itch. It was, again, going back to my intuition. It was, you need to learn this beautiful language, and it's not Canada. And France seems like it could be a good fit. So it really was not anything logical. This third book that I'm working on now unpacks that. It's like, Patricia, you're a really logical person who makes decisions based on things that make sense. Moving to France really didn't make sense. And yet here I am 7 years later.
I had this long love affair with Spain that lasted almost 15 years before I finally made the move. But I felt this pull there, like you said, there really wasn't even a logical reason to move there. I didn't have family from there. There was no way to get a job there. It just didn't make sense, but it was always in my mind. That idea just kept coming back to me.
Yeah. And for me, it was definitely the language. My mom said, when I needed to study a language in high school, she's like, you should study French because it's such a beautiful language. When I was little, we went to Quebec City, Canada, and both my mom and dad had studied French at university. I think there's something in my genes, but it was not until later in life that started to dawn on me.
So interesting. Well, once you had it in your mind that you're making this move, a big part of this move was going to be leaving your corporate life, your career.
Yeah.
What year did you move? What year was
In
that?
2018.
Yeah, in 2018, it was, the visas still exist that were then, but it was just a different world. People really weren't like taking remote work with them. And you really had to think about making some career sacrifices. I think a lot of people had to do at the time, like when I moved
Yes.
also. So I'm curious to know, what were some of the fears or doubts you had about leaving corporate life, making a move in your 50s? And how did you work through those fears and doubts?
The stability of a paycheck was a big fear for me. However, I'd gotten to a point in my career where I really did not feel appreciated. I was at a point where I was sick and tired of feeling that way. And all of a sudden, I have this desire, this urge to live in France. And the thing that really held me back from probably moving sooner was that fear of, would I have enough money to take a career break and get approved for a visa? It was inauguration day of 2017 that got me saying, Patricia, you've wanted to do this for a couple of years. You need to figure this thing out. And that's when I hired a life coach to help me get unstuck. And the thing that really held me back was that fear of looking at finances, right? It was a money block that I had. And she asked me, Patricia, okay, so you wanna make this move. How much would it take for you to show the French government that you could support yourself for a year and get the visitor visa? And I shrugged and said, I don't know. I'm afraid to look. And the reason I was afraid to look was because if I didn't have enough, this was just not rational. If I didn't have enough, then that would dash this dream forever. Not true, right? I could always earn more, save more. But in my mind, I wanted to have this dream. It was something that buoyed my spirits, going into the job that I didn't like. And so she gave me that as homework. I looked, and next week I shared what I found out, and I had enough to support myself for a few years in my savings. And so I said, okay, I'm doing it.
I love that you bring this up, because that is a big fear of people. They're afraid to crunch the numbers because they're afraid that the outcome is not going to be something that's going to allow them to embark on this dream. And so it is so important to crunch the numbers to know, how much does it actually cost to live in the place you want to move to? Because a lot of people too are also just assuming that it's going to be very similar to their cost of living where they live. In our Refreshers Lounge, we have a Move Abroad cost and savings calculator. And I find a lot of people, once they do that, they're like, oh my gosh, it's actually so much less than I thought. Not only that, but understanding what their financial situation is, right? Like, how much savings do they have? How much do they need to save? How long will it take them to save what they need, right? Really understanding everything. Like, what bills do you have now that you won't be having to pay once you move abroad? So really just seeing the whole landscape. That can give people a lot of confidence and thinking like, oh, this can actually happen. I can actually afford to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely the money thing, the paycheck, but then also, did I have enough in savings? Once that happened, I think that really helped me to say, okay, you're being pulled to do this thing. The other thing that I didn't mention as a reason that I decided to just go for it was that I had lost my parents, a few years earlier, right? Yeah. And I started to realize that life is short and I need to do things now because we're not promised tomorrow.
That is so true. I'm sorry to hear that, but
thank you.
I guess, my parents passed away also, and I try to think like, we're not promised tomorrow. And what am I doing with my time? That's what I started asking myself. Like,
exactly.
Why am I living this life I don't want to be living? I should be using this time to live the life that I want to.
Yeah, it's a wake-up call.
Yeah, it is a wake-up call. Exactly. What did your friends and family think of your idea? Like, how early on did you share with people that you were doing this? I'm curious to know.
I shared with my brother that I was thinking about doing this. And he's like, oh yeah, I think you should do it. And I was like, oh really? So that really kind of made me think, okay, maybe I could do this. He doesn't think it's a crazy idea. And I had a couple of friends at work that I kind of let in that I was planning this. And they were on board as well. I didn't tell everybody at work, but a couple of close friends at work I did. And they were very supportive as well. The other person I told, and this really, it didn't give me permission, but it felt like I was being granted permission, was my Uncle Bob. My Uncle Bob is probably 8 years older than my parents were. When I told him I wanted to do this thing, he's like, oh yeah, I think you should do it. And I said to him, I said, really? Because, you're of my parents' generation, and I don't know that they would be so supportive of me leaving my job and moving to a country where I visited for, less than a month. And I said, so it really surprises me. I said, I could hear my mom saying to me, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Right? That's something that was ingrained in me. You don't leave a job unless you have one at the ready. All those things just kept playing in my mind. And he said, oh, yes, I know that saying too. But he said, I prefer the adage, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And when he said that, I was like, okay, it's on. I'm doing this.
Thank you, Uncle Bob.
Yes.
That's amazing. It really does make a difference when you have that support, when you have people who don't think it's crazy, who are excited for you and support you. It's very empowering to have that around you. So
yes,
you were so lucky to have that, because I know not everybody has those kind of reactions from the people that they tell. So that's incredible. I want to talk about visas then. So on this journey, you had to figure out what kind of visa you needed. Can you tell us a bit about the visa that you chose and what the requirements were? And if there were any hiccups, in the process of applying, or if it was pretty smooth sailing?
The first visa that I applied for was the visitor visa. People who retire can come on it. And it's a visa where I couldn't work. And I needed to prove that I could support myself for the year, showing 3 months of bank statements. I had to write a letter of motivation why I wanted to move to France. And the other normal documents like the birth certificate, the other normal paperwork. And it was a pretty simple process. The first time I applied, they were still doing things through the French consulate. The second time I applied, I had to go through the VFS service. And now that has since changed for France. They're using another service completely. But I gathered my paperwork. I made my appointment. I went to DC. And it was a pretty streamlined process, not difficult, in my opinion. And so that was the first visa I went on. And so I had that for 3 years. In the middle of my third year, I decided I was going to switch my visa to one where I could earn money because, well, while I had enough money to support myself for a few years, I didn't have enough money to support myself forever. And so I needed to figure that out. And so I changed my visa to what's called the Profession Liberale visa. And that's the visa that I'm on now. And that permits me to have this business here in France, earn money. The requirements for that are to write a business plan that shows that the business is economically viable. And you need to have 3 years of projections of what you think your income will be, of course. It was very different from the first 3 years in business. I think one of the things that helped me was I showed that I could support myself yet again for another year so that I had a runway to get my business off the ground. I went back to the United States to get this visa because I was told by the prefecture here in France that I had to go back to the States to do it. I applied, and 6 days later, I got an email saying, your visa has been processed. It didn't tell me whether or not it was approved. And so the following day, I found out that I had been approved. It was good for a year. And then I renewed a year later. You needed to show that you had met the threshold for the French minimum wage. And I needed to have my business plan, but this time I needed to have it translated into French because I was renewing here in France. And I hadn't quite met that French minimum wage, so I was sweating bullets. But I had done okay. I had shown that people would pay me for what I was offering. And so I went into that visa appointment. I was like, I've done everything I can do. And probably about 3 or 4 weeks later, I got the notice saying to come back to the prefecture. And I just said, I hope they give me at least one more year, because the renewal could be good for 2 years or for 4 years. And I'm like, just give me another year to prove myself. And so I went in, and they, this was, I guess, after COVID. So they had the plexiglass and all of that. And they pushed something underneath the window. And I saw on the document, pluriannuel, multi-year. And I was like, oh, wow, at least I got 2 years. At least I got 2 years. I looked down at it once they gave it to me. I got renewed for 4 years. And so that was the biggest load off, because anybody who lives in a foreign country and has to renew their visa every year is a hassle.
It is true. Well, congratulations on that. One, incredible, because it takes time, dedication, patience, a lot of back and forth with these offices and, getting all the paperwork. So that is an incredible feat. And also to get that 4 years.
Thank you. Thank you. And next year, I can't believe I will have to renew.
Oh my gosh, it's already time. Yes. Well, thank you for sharing that information for people who are interested in France. At first, Patricia moved on the long stay visa. So that's a tourist visa. Long stay visa has different names. You can also think of it as a retirement visa, non-lucrative visa. Basically, as she mentioned, this is a visa where you are not supposed to be working. I will say in practice, there are a lot of Americans out there who are doing remote work on this visa, but the gist of it is you're not supposed to, but there are people doing that. Is that correct, Patricia?
That's my interpretation.
Yeah.
You can talk to other people who have a different interpretation. My take on it is, I don't want to be in a foreign country doing something that is not right. And so I think that's what you have to weigh. How are you going to feel as you're, living in another country? Are you going to feel okay with that?
Yeah, definitely. And it's similar in Spain. Spain has a non-lucrative visa. Now they have the digital nomad visa, but there are people in the non-lucrative who are still working on that and not supposed to. I guess the challenge with France is they don't have a digital nomad visa, so a lot of people are using this tourist visa. But I have heard, when it comes to renewing or modifying the visa, there may be some challenges there because you haven't been paying taxes on work you were doing, or there could be some challenges if you want to change things or modify.
So there's the immigration, and then there's the taxes, right? And I don't know necessarily if the two departments or two organizations talk, but this year I'm going to start the process for citizenship. And then next year and it takes some time. So next year I'm going to go for the 10-year resident card. So I just wanted everything to be above board so that as I'm applying for my citizenship, as I'm applying for the 10-year resident card, they can't say, oh yeah, but in this year, you were on a visitor visa, but you were earning income. That to me, that I just want it to be tight.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so that's why you modified to the Profession Liberal visa, which is like, I guess it's equivalent of like a freelancer or self-employed visa.
Yes, it's freelance self-employed visa, exactly. And the thing is, you can get approved, and I have clients in my program who have applied for this visa without having a business already, and they have been able to get it. If you do have a business already, that makes it easier, because then you can show that what you're doing brings in revenue.
We didn't even talk about what your business is or was then, because I love this visa that you can qualify for without even having a business that is up and running. So that is great. And so you created a business plan, you proposed it. And what was the business that you proposed? And is that still the work that you're doing today?
Before I moved to France, I wasn't really sure it was possible for me. I was a homebody. I wasn't a big traveler. This idea to live in France just came out of the blue. And here I was just doing this thing. So I made it happen. And in the first 2 weeks after I made the move, I had severe feelings of not doubt that I had done the right thing, but fears that, oh, what have you done? Right? You quit a good paying job. You're living off of savings. That bird in the hand started, playing in my mind. And so I had this back and forth. It was a tug of war where, did I really do the right thing? Was it so smart to quit my job? those feelings, those emotions had the potential to ruin my experience and my new start in France. And so before I moved to France, I had gone through coach training. And so I had some tools to kind of talk myself off the ledge. But I did it on my own, and I did it in a vacuum. And so 2.5 years later, when I was thinking, yeah, I need to start a business, I thought, well, Patricia, you already have the certification as a life coach. You now have the experience of having made a move abroad on your own as a single woman. It would have been really nice to have a program as a single woman where I could get the support, the encouragement, have somebody else help me through those tough times, and also acclimate to all the cultural differences. And so that's what I decided to stand up. So my signature program is called the Carefree Expat Incubator Program for single women who are ready to start the next chapters of their lives living and thriving in a foreign country, who want the support and encouragement of a community before and after making the move.
I'm feeling it, that there's just so much more interest and almost a sense of urgency of women who are like, I can't wait for someday. I need to figure out how to get out of here ASAP, basically. So I'm sure a lot of people are interested in your services. And that's great that you get to do something that you love as well and stay in France. So
yes.
So how many years have you been in France now?
So 7 whole years. So already, I mean, it's just gone by like this. It's the best decision that I could have made.
Well, let's talk about your life there now. So you live in Serrat, and I'm curious to know about like finding a home, because I know it is Hunger Games out there in a lot of cities that people are looking to move to, but you were moving to a smaller village. So what was it like finding a house there, or like a place to live there, but also maybe in Perpignan also where you started?
Right. So one of the requirements for the visitor visa, for the long stay visa, was to show that you had accommodations for an entire year. So what I did to get that was I went to vacation rental by owner, and then I talked to the owner of the property and said, well, I would like to stay in your place for a year. Could you give me a deal on your place? And that's how I found my first apartment in Perpignan. The images on the website were beautiful, had a nice little view. The problem with that was I couldn't smell the place. And so it had this horrible smell of sewer gas. So a week in, I said, I can't stay here. And I went looking for another place. I had already signed this lease. And fortunately, the place that I was looking at was owned by a doctor. And he said, well, you can get out of that lease by getting a medical certificate. So I went to another doctor, so there's not this conflict of interest, and got out of that first lease and did another kind of vacation rental by owner for that year. And so that's what I'm in now in Serrat, right? It's a vacation rental by owner. The landlord jumped at the opportunity because she was tired of coming and cleaning toilets every week or every 2 weeks. And it's been a great situation for me. So I don't know the experience that other people have when they go through the normal process where they need a dossier and they need to have a guarantor. It sounds like it's a lot more challenging. And in bigger cities, I hear that it's hard to find places to stay just because there's not a big supply.
Okay. So then what you're saying in it is essentially it's a short-term rental unit, but they're renting it to you for long-term.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Yeah. It's like a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
And let's talk about learning the French language. I mean, you had started before you moved, so that's great that you had that base, but how has learning French been for you over the past 7 years, and how fluent do you feel now?
Part of the reason I'm in France is the language. So I was highly motivated to learn it. Before I moved, I took a program called the Pimsleur Method. So 30 minutes a day. It's an audio program. I listened on my morning walks and repeated the prompts. And by the time I moved to France in 2018, I had a good base level of the language. And that really helped me. When I got to France that first year, I decided I really needed to become literate because I could speak it and I could understand slow spoken French, but I couldn't read it very well and I couldn't write it very well. So I was like, oh, Patricia, yeah, you need to fix that. So I went to a proper French class. That made me feel more comfortable. Over the course of these years, I guess a year and a half in, I called myself fluent. I had a conversation with an auto insurance agent in French over the phone. He understood me. I understood him. He had to dumb down some things, but at that moment I said, I'm fluent. So just last month, I sat for the DELF B2 exam. And it's an exam that has 4 parts to it: reading, writing, written comprehension, and oral comprehension. And it's tough. And I passed.
Yeah.
And I didn't just pass, right? I needed 50 out of 100. I got a 74.5. So I was just like, oh my goodness, I'm good.
That is like such great validation for all the hard work you've put in. And for those who don't know what the DELF is, or the B2, the DELF, this is a language exam. We have it also in Spain. It's called the DELE. And there's different levels to language learning. There's categories here in Europe that they use. So there's the A, B, and C level. So A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. And the A level, that's going to be your beginner colors, how to say what your name is, ask maybe for something at the store. B2, that's where you're getting into intermediate. That's where you're having conversations with people and really like living your life in the language, right? And then C is more higher level. That would be advanced. So these exams are hard. They are challenging. It's like taking an SAT exam, the amount of prep you have to put in. And they're pass fail. And so you passed with flying colors, it sounds like.
Thank you. And I think the thing that made it even more challenging, there's cultural nuances to it. Like for the B2 level, the French love to debate, right? They love a good argument. So the presentation I had to make had to be argumentative. The written part, I had to present something and argue my point. And that's not necessarily something I do that well in English.
Yeah, I can imagine. That sounds, oh my God, very anxiety inducing.
Yes.
Was there a specific reason why you took the exam?
Yes. So as I mentioned, I plan to go for citizenship, and I also plan to go for the 10-year resident card before the citizenship gets approved. I'm claiming it. And in order to go for those, for the citizenship, you need a B2 level, and that's recently increased from a B1 level. For the 10-year resident card, you'll need a B1 level.
Yes. Well, congratulations again. And yeah, for anyone who's interested in getting citizenship in a foreign country, there usually is a language requirement. And it's funny, Spain's language requirement is much lower than in France. In Spain, you need an A2. So that's still beginner level. In Spain, also, you have to wait as a U.S. citizen 10 years before you can apply. So I know sometimes people get a little bit nervous about these language exams, but by the time you hit 10 years, you should have an A2 in Spanish. And I'm assuming, you should have a B2 in French by the time you hit your 10-year mark.
Yeah, and it had been lower, but I think starting next year, those are the requirements. They've raised them.
Very good to know. Well, so you've been in France for quite a while now. Culturally, has there been anything that has surprised you or has just taken a while to adjust to in France?
Yeah, there are lots of cultural differences that are challenging. I think the one that has taken me the longest to adjust to is personal space. Like the perimeter of personal space here is much less or non-existent. So like in line at the grocery store, walking down the street, it's, somebody brushes you. It's just, it's not a big deal. And for me, that is jarring. And I think that's the biggest cultural difference that I've had.
That makes sense. That happens a lot in countries that are on the Mediterranean. Yeah. People are just social, friendly, close. And that is an adjustment if you're coming from the US. You had mentioned going for citizenship and your permanent residency. So to me, that sounds like you want to stay in France. Do you know, is France going to be your forever home?
Well, it's hard for me to say that. I never imagined that I would be living in France, right? Somebody would have asked me before I got the urge to move to France, do you see yourself living in a foreign country? I would have said, hell no. So asking me that, yeah, I feel France is home for me. I don't see myself living anyplace else. but who knows?
Right? Anything is possible, especially after you get your, once you get your French passport, then you have a whole list of countries that you could move to in Europe
Yeah,
if you wanted to.
absolutely.
All right. Well, we are getting close to the end here, but I'd love to have your insights because I know you're just a wealth of information for any woman out there who feels stuck, who feels scared to make this leap in life. For someone who wants to move abroad, what advice would you give them?
I think it's so important if you want to do this thing, if you want to make a move abroad, know why, right? And not just, oh, I like a French cuisine or I want a more relaxed lifestyle. Go deeper than that because, those can be the starting point. Well, I want a more relaxed lifestyle. Why is that important? Ask yourself that question. Why is that important? Well, because I feel so stressed. And why is not being stressed important? Dig down. Well, because I feel it really impacting my health. And why is being healthier more important? Well, because longevity is important to me and being there for my family or whatever that is. And then once you get down to the why that is tied to your core values, then doing the hard parts, moving through the uncertainty to make a move abroad and being abroad and having to deal with the cultural differences and the administrative stuff and all the stuff that is going to be hard makes it easier when you can remind yourself, but I'm doing this because of this. This is my why. And it just makes it so much easier.
Such great advice. All right, Patricia. Well, where can our audience find you, connect with you, find out about your programs?
They can visit my website, thecouragecatalyst.com, and they can learn more about my signature program, the other things that I offer, one-on-one coaching, information sessions, Women Rising roundtables. They can check out my YouTube channel, which is Patricia Brooks, The Courage Catalyst. And I, post videos every Thursday about my experiences. I do some vlogs. It's a fun channel. I'm on Instagram and on Facebook at The Courage Catalyst.
Fabulous. Well, we'll be sure to drop all those links in the show notes. Patricia, this has been such a pleasure being with you, hearing from you, and just learning more about your journey in France. So thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge with our audience.
Thank you so much, Seppi. This has been such a great conversation. You ask such wonderful questions.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this episode and leave feeling like a move abroad is even more possible for you. If you're happy with what you saw, I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and leave a question or comment because I would love to hear from you. If you're ready to take action on your dream to move abroad, be sure to grab my Visa Guide to Europe. It's your roadmap to over 50 viable visa options in 19 countries. You can grab the link below in the show notes. And don't forget to get on the wait list for my next Move Abroad After 30 Masterclass, a masterclass for women age 30 and up, which is a step-by-step training to help you fast track your move abroad. And grab the link in the show notes as well. And last but not least, a huge shout out to our sponsor, International Living. Thank you so much for making this season possible. Until next time, ciao for now.